everyone. Good news to share with you all. I'm now officially a charter holder. After last week's results, things moved pretty quickly, and within a couple of days it became official. So a huge milestone ticked off and a big personal achievement. I'd rate it one of the most, as far as my career is concerned, I'd rate it right up there as far as achievements is concerned. And many people at work, mostly CAs, they asked, well, what happens next? And the reality is nothing happens. Life moves on, the career moves on. It's a long career, and things continue. But what I did want to share with you all today was a little bit of background about myself. This video is going to be geared towards people in their early 20s and people just starting out, less than 5 years of work experience, what they can expect in terms of income growth over a period of time, as well as wealth accumulation. Now, I can only share my example. I can give you the progress that I've made over the last 12 years, and it's very unique, the circumstances that affect an individual. But from an overall perspective, the most important thing is long-term goals as far as wealth is concerned, and how do you plan to achieve them. And hopefully the next few minutes can provide you some sort of an insight in terms of what you can expect, because a lot of the people, especially when they're young, they focus on income as opposed to wealth. And there are a few things, caveats there. As you grow older, you realize that actually income is just going to be one source of cash flow for you. There's going to be other means that you need to access as far as generating substantial wealth over a period of time is concerned. Now, one thing to keep in mind is, just give you a very quick description. I'm currently working in a middle management position, back office, in a big bank in financial planning and analysis. And that's important, the distinction between back office and front office, because income structures can vary very differently, especially around remuneration and bonuses. So just bear in mind, I like to think myself off as an average individual in terms of the annual income that I earn, as well as in terms of the net wealth that I have here in New Zealand. I'd probably be right in the middle. I have checked some statistics to see where I fit, and therefore I can't talk to the really super successful people, because I'm not one of those, and I also cannot talk to the people who are struggling to meet their higher cost of living here in New Zealand. I can talk to probably the average person who has that desire to increase their standard of living, at the same time accelerate wealth generation, and try and earn as much as they can. So that's the target, and hope you guys enjoy it. All right, so let's profile myself. In my mid-30s, married, and I have one beautiful daughter who's 2 years old. I put myself down into the career development stage, where human capital exceeds financial capital. Time horizon, basically 2 stages, present to retirement. I intend to retire in 20 years' time, and then life after retirement. As far as liquidity needs are concerned, I obviously want to keep increasing my standard of living, and that requires consumption to go up, so cash flow would be required. Medium term, I want to move to a bigger home, and longer term, the strategy would be to fund my daughter's higher education. As far as risk is concerned, ability to take on risk, I think it's above average. Given that I have a long time horizon to retirement, there's no immediate liquidity need other than maintaining standard of living. And I'd like to think that I have low standard of living risk, given that things are going pretty smooth. Risk willingness, now this is quite low. I suffer from loss aversion bias and multiple other emotional biases. And behavior type, historically I've been a passive preserver. In the last year or so have become a bit more aggressive, so just trying to find my feet and identify the appropriate investor type. But if I look at the last decade or so, definitely in the passive preserver category. Just cover legal and tax quickly. Legal, yeah, there's some risk associated with new tenancy laws and landlord obligations that people have to meet here in New Zealand. given that I am a property owner and I am a landlord. There's some risks associated with that. And tax, well, huge number of talks post the COVID world in New Zealand would probably be associated with capital gains tax, higher marginal tax rates, and wealth tax. So in the short term this is not a risk, but in the longer term surely I think there are going to be increased taxes in New Zealand, something that I need to worry about. I started working full-time in 2009, so that's about 12 years of work experience, and there has been pretty good growth in income in a couple of years. Other years have been relatively flat. The first big jump came in 2011 where income grew more than 20%. 2013 it bumped up more than 30%, and then in 2018 was the biggest jump of my career where in 1 year the income had risen more than 40%. Those pink balloons are new roles that I took up, so I'm into my 6th role now, having moved how many companies? I think this is my 4th company now, and yeah, it's been pretty good. I've picked up quite a few roles, working primarily in back office financial planning and analysis, so not front office, not client facing, but working behind the scenes. And last couple of years the income growth has been pretty flat, and it's getting tougher. You know, as you can see in this pattern, one of the ways to have large increases in pay here in New Zealand, basically 2 ways. One way is to move companies. That way you can get more calibrated towards the market rates. And the second is promotions, but there are only so many promotional opportunities that you can get within one company. So a lot of people, what they do is they get a promotion. After a couple of years they move on to another company, get a pay bump, then they get a promotion, and then there's like a laddered approach to higher incomes. Obviously it gets difficult as you go up and up and up, because the number of opportunities to keep rising are limited. What I like to see more is the compounded annual growth rate of personal income, and that's more stable. So for me, since 2014, I'm pretty flat at 11% growth, and I think it's pretty good. You know, if you really look at it, if every year, if you started off at whatever salary you did, and if you keep earning 11% every year on it, that's going to be pretty good over, say, a 25, 30-year period. The problem is to maintain it, and this is where a few people have asked, oh, what happens after the charter? And I go, well, nothing happens. The career keeps moving as it is. You just hit another major milestone. You get more well-rounded in your personality, and you get more exposure. So that's what happens. And for me, I'm happy with this 11%, but maintaining it is going to be difficult as I progress in my career, unless I make major strides in my career. Because this percentage is going to keep dropping. So trying to maintain it is a challenge that I have for myself, but I'm not overly concerned about it, and which leads me into my next discussion point, and that's net wealth. And look, I'm not showing you the real dollar values, because that's not really the point. The point here is about the growth, and it's about the graph that you guys will follow in your careers. That's more important. So having a look at net wealth. Now, again, if you just look at the simple annual growth rates, you will see some big spikes earlier on, more than 50% in 2011, up I think it's 145% in 2012. Basically, I've been growing my net wealth every year. 2014 was the only year where the growth was close to 0%. But every other year has been pretty reasonable growth. The aqua bubbles here represent the 2 property investments that I made. 2013 was a property investment. 2018 was another apartment where I currently live in. So that has helped me tremendously in terms of wealth accumulation. Again, for this kind of graph, it's important to see the compounded annual growth rate. And that's also quite consistent, actually, since 2014. It hovered around the 50% mark and dropped a little bit in the last 2 years, and currently sitting at 42%. Now that means every year I'm putting on, my net wealth is increasing by 42%. Again, I see this coming down in the next few years, and it's going to be, again, this is going to be challenging to maintain. But the reality is that the property investments are really helping. You're basically paying off debt and substituting it with equity, coupled with regular capital appreciation of the property, and kind of have a good mix. A lot of people in New Zealand are doing it. Some of them don't even work. All they do is invest in property and flip property. So it seems to be a safe haven. Now, what you'll see in these graphs is obviously one thing: the wealth is growing at 42%, and the salary is only growing at 11%. And that's the kind of graph you want to see early on in your career. You want your wealth to multiply faster than your salary, because the salary is going to get capped out, and the room for salary to constantly keep growing. Obviously there are a few people who are going to end up becoming CEOs, GMs, and really senior people who are going to make a lot of money. But for the general public, for people who are in back office, who get a little bit of bonus here and there, the growth opportunities are not going to be as much, and the salary spikes are not going to be as much. So the focus should always be, according to me, on net wealth. And if your net wealth can outpace your salary growth, that's fantastic. At the same time, obviously, the reality is with salary growth, what happens is your standard of living increases as well. It's very hard to maintain or have a very low standard of living, and with salary continually rising, you are going to consume a lot more, and the costs add up. Eventually you reach a point where pretty much not much can be saved, and therefore investment is important. Obviously in the curriculum as well, the use of leverage is widely covered. From an individual perspective, home loans or property ownership is probably going to be the biggest leveraged instrument that you're going to buy. And as I mentioned, for a majority of New Zealanders, property has been the way to go in the last 2 or 3 decades. Just continually gives returns, is safe, and has made the general population here who are property owners extremely wealthy in a short span of time, primarily due to the leverage factor. Yeah, so the use of leverage has become very important in today's times. Those conventional means of saving and investing don't necessarily work. Obviously, it depends on how much you're saving, what sort of net wealth you're comfortable with, and lots of other factors. But what I have experienced is that leverage is playing a crucial role in wealth multiplication. So for me, I've drifted away from salary growth in the last few years. If it grows, it grows. The focus has shifted to net wealth, and property ownership is helping me out, along with entering the stock markets again. I had exited largely due to the deposits that I had to put through for the 2 properties that I bought in the last decade or so. But now I can look to invest further and see where I can make some gains. So that was really it, guys. Hope you found that useful in some way or the other, and could compare in terms of where you're at in your life stage and career stage. And do provide me your feedback, because that's quite important in terms of me trying to come up with new content. The plan is to just look at the current working environment, as well as looking at the markets, and trying to make sense of it as far as what does that mean for us in terms of how do we fit in, and as individuals, how can we better plan for our future. I mean, that's the goal, isn't it? So yeah, I'll now that my exams are over, and I can take more topics, especially around New Zealand and the working environment here. So do look forward to some of the other videos that I plan to release in the next coming months. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.